Hey guys, Zibboyeye or just Zib is fine, and today we've reached the end of our retrospective. That's right, it's the final chapter. It's been a year-long journey that's left me a lot to reflect on. Like how it probably wouldn't have been a year-long journey if I didn't waste 4 months on my Saw 3 review, why I used to film in 30 frames per second, and why I don't just start the review now. It's Saw, the final chapter. Or Saw 7 as the menu calls it. Or Saw 3D. I'm just gonna alternate the titles as we go. So Saw the Final 3D 7 starts where it all began and left off. I've probably said it 1,000 times by now, but the first Saw is my favorite movie of this series, and getting to see what takes place immediately after is a good hook. And it gives me what I wanted to see since. Hope I'm not too late for the sequel, am I? Lawrence is back, and it only took 6 movies. As I stated in my Saw 2 review, questions are what I consider to be the lifeline of Saw. It can only end once we get an answer. Wow, I sounded really bored. So you think I'd be overjoyed to get an answer, but it's not like the series tried to lead up to it. There wasn't a build-up feeding hints to the audience, making us question, is he dead, is he alive? Because of it, his abrupt appearance after 6 sequels doesn't have the oomph it should. It's too little, too late. As for the character, Lawrence, or how we remember him, tonally doesn't fit this movie. The first Saw was an emotionally engaging suspense film that focused on characters such as Lawrence who developed over time. But as the series continued, Saw grew to give more attention and spectacle to the killing and traps. The world as we felt it changed, and it isn't the same as when we last left Lawrence. But that would be more of a problem if he was written and acted accurately to the first movie.
To be able to sustain such a traumatic experience and yet find the positive in that grisly act, it's a remarkable feat indeed.
Yeah, Carrie always doesn't care.
Remarkable, if not a little perverse.
He plays up his role like a joke. In all fairness, it is an over-the-top movie, but look at how Costas Mandylor portrays Hoffman.
Give me the envelopes. That's not a request.
He doesn't hold his role in such an exaggerated manner and manages to be intimidating. As much as the Saw series has become looked down upon, a majority of their actors still treat their script with a respect that I can't say Elwes shares. If there's anything positive I have to say about Elwes, it's that there's a small nugget of joy in seeing him reprise his character. Now, Lawrence starts the film, but is he a big part of it? Let's save that for later. If the fact that I can refrain from talking about him until the end of the review isn't enough of an indication, the answer is no. Once again, we have an opening kill, but this one is a bit unique. In fact, it led me to a certain expectation of this movie. The game plot centers around Bobby, a man who wrote a book lying about having been in a jigsaw game.
I had to insert 2 hooks into my pectoral muscles and hoist myself up.
Wow, how incredibly non-specific! I'm gonna be super shocked if you have to go through what you just described at the end of the movie. Now, how you lie about being the victim of a long-sought-after serial killer without the cops rigorously interrogating you, or finding that you can't even point to the scene you supposedly escaped from suspicious, I don't know. He even has fake scars. No one investigated this? Now, I'm going to go over where I thought the plot was headed at first. The public game was very against Jigsaw's MO. I thought the characters were going to walk out just fine, revealing it was just a show. Then in the game plot, we see the media give extensive attention to survivors of Jigsaw. The public eats up these gory death games as much as the audience of the series. With an antagonist who adores the violence just as much, you can create a meta-narrative comparing these traits to the viewer. You can use this to reflect on what the series has become and question the draw of brutality. But that's too much work compared to rehashing the formula introduced in Jeff's plot 4 movies ago. I'll let my past reviews cover what's wrong with this. You meet them, and they're already in danger. There's no time to build any emotional investment whatsoever. After you see the last guy die, you know someone's going to die this time too. Yes, I've covered this a lot. Is there anything new I have to say? Well, an issue I have with the physical challenges is that it's too easy to write whatever result the writers want. In Saw 3, Wannell and Wan had to construct this flashback to make this misunderstanding in order to motivate Amanda to kill Lynn. If they didn't do this, killing Lynn would have a flimsy foundation, leaving the audience with weaker belief in the probability of this event. But here, the writers can write, he misses the key. He wasn't fast enough. Physical mistakes are relatable, that they're easy for the audience to believe. But it doesn't utilize character motivation or perspective. It's a cheap tactic. It's lazy writing that much of the deaths in this movie are excused by. It's no secret that I hate this setup, and that's because I love the first 3 movies. The original trilogy used the death game as a scenario. You can consider this like a driver. The focus of these movies were the characters and their development. You can call this the passenger. The death game's purpose was to allow for an environment that would spur character development, to drive the character and their story to the audience. But after Saw 4, the traps grew and grew in focus. Fleshing out the characters faced extinction. Instead, characters were little more than a subject to display these traps. Now the characters are used to deliver the death game to the audience. As you can see, the roles have been reversed, and it remains that way in the final chapter. Skipping ahead, the game lacks relevance to the other plot. It's used to distract the police, but any game could have done that. It didn't need to be this guy, this game. In the grand scheme of things, Bobby and his story are irrelevant. At least Saw 5 gave these characters one interaction at the end. This movie doesn't even do that. Anything else about the game plot? Well, it gives us a flashback of hip John. How you do, fellow kids? The game also facilitates much of what makes this movie Saw 3D. How does the 3D hold up? Well, I don't have a 3D Blu-ray player, or a copy of Saw 3D in 3D, or 3D glasses. But I can still see the effects of the effects. For example, there's a stark lack of contrast. Objects and characters tend to blend into their environment. Not only that, but colors can look unnatural. Yo, this blood makes me feel like I'm in Danganronpa. And the overall image just looks softer than previous films. But this is likely because the 3D nature of the movie extends beyond name. Whereas many movies released in 3D have the effect applied to the 2D film post-recording, Saw 3D was filmed in 3D, then converted to 2D for video release. So the movie may have looked better in 3D and these problems could just be an issue with the 2D conversion, but since most people will be watching in 2D, I think it's important to cover. The movie doesn't feel like it needs to be in 3D though. You get the obligatory 3D shots, stuff flying in your face, but for the most part they feel tacked on for the sake of the gimmick, which I guess is a good thing since you won't be missing much if you watch in 2D, but I can understand if you watched in 3D and wanted a bit more. Also, I don't know if they had trouble editing the 3D footage or what, but the composite shots in this are awful. Saw 3D has the worst effects in the series yet. I can't show much of it, so it's hard to prove my claim, but if you have the movie, just look at the flappiness of the skin in the third challenge. Again, Tony Ianni is production designer, and his designs for traps and environments aren't as inspired as Hackles or Berghoff's. But despite the cheap nature of the movie, it goes all the way. It's probably the most brutal of the series. Some fans may love it for that, and some fans may find it a bit too over the top. But let's see if the other side of the story warrants a more grounded tone. The premise is really cool. It's about Jill on the run as Hoffman seeks revenge.
I need complete immunity. My husband, John, had an accomplice. You know him, and he definitely knows you.
Is that right?
How do the cops not know about Hoffman? He massacred the FBI and burned down a facility. And they don't mention Strom in this movie, so they don't suspect him.
My husband, John, had an accomplice.
The script doesn't mention the agents killed in the last movie once.
You know him, and he definitely knows you.
Is that right?
No wonder Hoffman thinks he can get away. The script already wiped away his consequences. I question why Hoffman still followed John's will in the last movie, and it makes even less sense here. Hoffman already went against John's ideology and is trying to kill his ex-wife. Yet simultaneously, Hoffman still has enough respect for him to carry out his wishes? Once again, we follow the police trying to catch Hoffman. And at this point, every recognizable character has been killed off. At least once. Having essentially rebooted the police force devalues the life of these characters and shows just how expendable they are. Despite never being seen before, Saw 2 review flashbacks, I better be right. Despite never being seen in the series before, the cop has a past with Hoffman.
Drop the gun.
So Matthews plants evidence and is forced to play a game. Carrie examines bodies to catch criminals and is forced to play a game. Hoffman kills a guy and John does nothing. Should I test him? What's the rush? Dead. Hoffman's character was sorta tragic. We were introduced to Hoffman as a cop and we gradually learned more about him. After his sister was murdered, revenge sent him off the deep end. Then being shown a new way to seek justice, Hoffman assists Jigsaw. There's a sense of irony in his story. In John's attempt to save Hoffman from being a murderer, Hoffman learns of his own love of brutality and is more willing to indulge in his bloodlust as Jigsaw. This is an interesting character transformation. He went from defender of the law to deranged killer. But who needs a compelling backstory like that? He was always the killer. So eventually Hoffman leads the cops into his final trap. So after all these crazy traps, it's just turrets? Used as turrets do? Now you may be wondering about Jill, and so am I. The movie starts off making you think Jill will be the main character, but she's absent for most of the second act. The expendable cops are given more screen time. So rather than focusing on the character most in danger who ended the last movie, the film devotes more time to those of minimal character investment.
We got it all ass backwards here.
Saw 6 ended on an interesting point. This is a premise that has potential. This is the story of a character who's been building up since Saw 4, yet she lacks due presence in the series' conclusion. Both Hoffman and Jill are intelligent characters. Well, when the script isn't being stupid. She's outsmarted police, she's outsmarted Hoffman. This is an even game, however Jill cowers in a cell for most of the movie. We could have had a really cool battle here, but the movie decides to point its attention elsewhere. Nearing the end, we get a bit more of the conflict we wanted to see. And inconspicuously unlocked a jar door to the evidence room featuring all the traps of the series. Don't mind if I do. If there's one thing I can say about Hoffman, he's got good taste. For those who watch the series for the gore, finally getting to see the reverse bear trap do its thing is a good payoff. It's a little unrewarding to see Jill lose at the end, but it only gets worse from here. Okay, before I get to the big reveal, I want to note that these two characters are never explained in the regular cut. Really, they're the two characters from the opening kill. I mean, they don't need to be here, they never affect the plot beforehand, so still pointless opening kill. But who's this new pig mask figure? It's Lawrence. So Hoffman, the last 4 movies' big bad guy, is bested by a character who's been in less than 1/3 of the series. Oh, how earned of a conclusion. So how did this happen?
Congratulations, Dr. Gordon. You survived.
Lawrence's game was to kill Adam. He failed. But the game Jigsaw assigns you doesn't matter at all. It's just about if you survive or not. Matthew survived. Why didn't he get to be free? By that logic, shouldn't Hoffman live, especially since the trap was supposed to kill him? Adam survived too. Why not save him? Especially why not Adam, considering...
Don't worry. I'll bring someone back. I promise.
But wait, there's more.
Hello, Dr. Gordon. You are perhaps my greatest asset.
And I smell a rewrite coming on.
Because what they don't know is how we really were there, even though they didn't know we were there, you know? Couldn't have said it better myself.
Jeff's wife. She'll be perfect.
John knew Lynn anyway.
I was a guest at your hospital once.
He could have chose her himself. Fans have theorized since Saw 2 that this limp was to imply that this was Lawrence, but I don't think it was planned beyond a maybe. Is it too much to believe the geriatric cancer patient had a limp? But even their explanations for the other surgeries aren't eye-openers. John did surgery before Lawrence was ever in the picture. Look at Amanda's game.
There is only one key to open the device. It's in the stomach of your dead cellmate.
Hoffman can perform surgery too. We saw him do it in the last movie. We even see him do it in this very movie. There's no reason to suspect the other surgeries were done by someone else. They tried to explain these events that already had ample reason. They make no more sense than they did before. Beyond that, the foreshadowing to Lawrence's reveal is the weakest in the whole series. Outside of the opening flashback, he makes what's little more than a cameo appearance and buggers off until nearly an hour later. So what's the justice Hoffman served? Look, I love the first Saw, I love the bathroom, I love Lawrence. This is supposed to be a fan servicey scene, but it's an unrewarding punishment for Hoffman. Hoffman relished in the brutality of his traps, so for him to just starve to death feels mundane and underwhelming. Not only that, but even when they rewrote the events of the first Saw, Hoffman was nowhere to be seen. This isn't poetic justice, he had nothing to do with this game in the first place.
Game over.
And that's it for Saw 3D, aka Saw 7, aka Saw the Final Chapter. Before I go into my overview of the series, what are my last thoughts on this movie? First, a bit of backstory. Originally, the final chapter was supposed to be a two-part story, but when Saw 6 flopped, the studio questioned the longevity of this series and decided to just give it one more. On the one hand, a two-part story could have fleshed out the conflict between Jill and Hoffman rather than sharing space with a cop and game plot. However, I think they could have given the Jill-Hoffman conflict more attention even if it were only in one movie. Just cut the game plot out, it's pointless anyway. Or better yet, make it have a point, put relevant characters like Jill or Hoffman in a game. I just can't get over how the whole basis of the series by the end of it is used for plots that are largely unimportant. But my biggest issue with the series is its transition from thoughtful, engaging drama with violence for grit to mindless gore with minimal plot. I will praise the original trilogy while denouncing Saw 4 onward, but I don't want to mock the fans of the later movies, which I feel referring to them as torture porn lends to. It seems like critics attach themselves to this term to easily demean those who made the film and those who like it. Gory movies possess a bleak corner the public tends to view them in, but is the cathartic feeling gore fans get any less than the catharsis one gets from watching an action movie? I don't think so. Action movies are more accessible because they don't tend to offend those with queasy stomachs. Because of this, action movies tend to be more accepted, while movies like Saw 7 are looked down upon. However, as much as I will defend the fandom, I do not consider Saw's transformation justifiable. Yeah, I wish the series could have stuck to its narrative-driven origins, but despite the switch the series underwent, I consider Saw a victim. The first Saw may not have been a gory movie, but I can't blame people for expecting such content. With some of the shots from the trailers, misleading posters, and Halloween timing, it's what a lot of promotional material was banking on. With the way it was advertised, even those who may have appreciated the mystery were deferred, leaving many of the seats filled by those who wanted to see gore. The fans asked for more gore and the series obliged. Was the studio going to say no to the people writing their check? Saw was a great movie with great characters and a great narrative, but a few movies later, and all that changed. The identity of Saw is a victim of marketing, which led to false expectations from a demographic the studio felt they had to meet, and the public is left remembering its last impression. A shallow puddle of viscera. But I will always remember Saw for its compelling mystery and characters and those whose lives in Hollywood were started by the series' bold and experimental origins. As you probably know, that's not it for the series, but whether or not the franchise has the right to rise from the ashes is an examination for another day. But for the time being, I've been Zibboyeye, or just Zib is fine, and this has been the Saw Retrospective. Zibbo, bye bye!